Well, welcome to our quarterly Opening Doors update. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, but I also see some new ones. So just to kind of let you know why we have these meetings, the City of Bethlehem in January of 2024 released its affordable housing plan, which we called Opening Doors Strategies for Building Housing Stability in Bethlehem. Tonight, we'll be sharing a lot of exciting updates on our work, but we're also going to be diving deeper to try to answer some of the most common questions that we hear from the public. Things like, why are only luxury apartments being built? Why can landlords increase rent however much they want? Why can't I find the type of housing that my family needs? Housing policy and development is complicated, and things don't always work the way most of us feel like they should. Tonight, we're going to try to demystify how development happens and what tools we have available to impact affordability through innovative programs and policy. We heard loud and clear from more than 3,000 residents during the Opening Doors process that they wanted to see us take a broader role in expanding affordability, protecting renters, and providing more housing choices for all members of our community. But Pennsylvania law does not allow us to explicitly enact rent control. It doesn't allow us to mandate that every project include affordable units. But we are finding creative ways to do more working within Pennsylvania's constraints. Unfortunately, if your landlord raises your rent $600, we can't stop them. In a free market economy, landlords set whatever price they want. But if we, as the City of Bethlehem, invest money into a project, we can then have a say in the rents. We can set affordability periods and influence the design of a project. So tonight you'll hear about innovative ways the city is working to play a bigger role in the development process to give our community more affordable housing choices while protecting renters. This work involves many partnerships, new ways of thinking about government investment in development, and an opportunity to give property owners more choices in how they use their land. The city is continuing to support our existing programs like our first-time home buyers, our owner-occupied housing rehab program, and continuing to support the work of our nonprofit partners, New Bethany, North Penn Legal Services, and Community Action Development Bethlehem in the realm of rental assistance, landlord-tenant advocacy, and mediation, and eviction diversion. I'm going to turn things over first to the city's Director of Community and Economic Development, Laura Collins, who will walk us through Opening Doors strategies and one of our major initiatives from the last 2 years.
Thank you, and I'm going to stay seated for no reason other than I just want to. But thank you for coming tonight. As Sarah said, I'm Laura Collins. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development. And when we completed our housing plan in 2023, it set out 5 strategies with about 10 different projects that we were intending to advance over those next 5 years. And we have been making great progress in all 5 of these categories. We've talked, as Sarah said, at 5 or 6 meetings like this about a number of different projects. Tonight, we are going to talk about the first, second, and third strategies in particular to highlight a few projects that maybe you've heard about before, but that have exciting developments and new initiatives that are forthcoming that are important really for the community to know about. But that doesn't mean we're not also making progress in strategy 4 and strategy 5. We talked at one of our meetings last year about the ways in which we are partnering with some really critical partners like Community Action Development Bethlehem and New Bethany. Anna and Mark are both here tonight, and amazing partners. We talked a lot about the success and impact of, for example, the tenant advocate at Community Action and the tenant-based rental assistance program at New Bethany under that strategy 4. And of course, in strategy 5, thinking about state enabling policies, programs, and regional housing planning, that work is happening ongoing between the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission with their affordable housing strategy development, which we've been active participants in, and also, the governor's housing plan, which we are expecting to come out soon. We were active as well in influencing some of the discussion about what our needs are specific here in the region. We're going to take, though, tonight the first, second, and third strategies in reverse. And so I will just start with strategy 3, building partnerships with institutions. These are institutions like the Bethlehem Housing Authority, Community Action, and even partners like Lehigh Valley Industrial Park, who have made some really critical projects possible. Why we are looking to institutions for partnership is because there are certain things that we as a city just simply can't do, to Sarah's point. But we have partners like the Housing Authority, for example, who have access to different legal tools and financial resources. And building the relationship between the city and the Housing Authority, for example, really unlocks a lot of important opportunities to better help people, live in, stay in affordable housing units. So with the example of the Housing Authority, I'll just talk first about one of our probably most ambitious and largest projects that we're pursuing under the Opening Doors plan, and that's the Pembroke Choice Neighborhoods implementation. It's a $500,000 grant from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development made it possible for us to undertake a 2-year community-driven neighborhood transformation planning process. We were one of 13 communities across the country that was awarded this grant in 2023. And we spent 2 years with the Housing Authority, residents of the community, and a number of neighborhood partners, community partners, institutions who served on the steering committee to put together a transformation plan that meets HUD's objectives and accomplishes transformation in these 3 key areas, which is housing, of course, the key component of the program, but also thinking about how if you're redeveloping public housing, how you're doing more than just building new physical structures. How are you supporting people, and how are you creating a neighborhood that is comprehensive and meets the needs of the community? So we were thrilled to finalize our plan just a few months ago. We presented that to HUD, and HUD did accept the plan, which is a huge milestone for this project, but it really reflects a lot of work and a lot of partnership with a lot of people who I see in this room today. And it is just the first step in a long process of transforming the existing 196 units that are at Pembroke into approximately 456 mixed income housing units. So that's a 1-for-1 replacement of the public housing, and then also the development of additional units at different income price points. The idea being that you're creating an integrated neighborhood where there's housing options for people at different income levels. People have an opportunity to grow out of perhaps their public housing, but stay in their own neighborhood and advance into different types of housing. We talked about this plan a lot at the last meeting, so I will be very brief and just once again running through. The site plan itself is one that imagines, as I said, about 450 total units, replacing the 196 that are there currently. That's a mix of townhouses, walk-ups, apartments, including senior housing. Here's a look of what that could be from above. If you imagine the left-hand side of your screen is Pembroke Road. The right-hand side is Marvine that intersects. And then Stefco is up at the top of your screen there. And that's Justborn, which borders the property. This is a view from the street of what we could imagine this redevelopment to look like. With a lot of community input, we thought about how the existing neighborhood does certainly have an identity, and you want to preserve that while also modernizing and creating a neighborhood that accomplishes or meets the needs of the people who live here. And talking with folks in the neighborhood was a really critical piece. We understood that this is a community where a lot of people spend time on their front porches, and preserving space for gathering and community in that way was a really important part of the design for that plan. We thought about how people are connecting within the neighborhood, walking paths and safe crossings, while also making sure that there's places for people to park, so that everybody has an ability to do what they need to do in the neighborhood. And I think we really accomplished that with the plan that we presented to HUD. So from here, we are continuing with the Housing Authority to evaluate our next steps, working with project partners, and thinking about ways to come up with the money to bring this plan to life. But the housing, of course, is one component, but one thing that we are able to move on right away is putting the framework in place for the people and the neighborhood components. So in addition to, as I said, just building housing, we are building structures within this neighborhood whereby people are supported through various programs, initiatives, bringing together various community partners. And that really centers on a partnership that we're developing with the United Way of the Greater Lehigh Valley. We have Aaron here as well today. So we appreciate so many people stepping up to the plate. And with the United Way, we are going to be able to pursue a neighborhood partnership program, an NPP. It's a program that'll give the financial structure and sustainability to really carry out these programs both in neighborhood strategies that are here and then the people strategies, which are here, and to start moving these forward in the shorter term. So even before a shovel is in the ground on physical improvements in the neighborhood, there is a lot of work happening that is continuing to improve just the lives of people who are already currently living there, whether that's in workforce development programs, educational programs, community building, neighborhood safety, street safety. All of these things are continuing to advance, and we're really excited about that. But indeed, this is a very long-term project, and it's a lot of units, but it will take time to build. There are other projects that we are working on with partners that are much further along and closer to fruition. And one example of that, and I want to just invite our partner, Anna Smith from Community Action Development Bethlehem, to talk a little bit about the Western Gateway Project, which is a perfect example of showcasing the power of partnership and an opportunity to bring some new units online even sooner than some of these other projects.
Thanks so much. Thank you. My name's Anna Smith. I'm the Director of Community Action Development Bethlehem. We are a community development and affordable housing nonprofit that works throughout the city of Bethlehem, and we've been on Bethlehem's south side for almost 30 years now. We are a subsidiary of Community Action Lehigh Valley, which has operated housing rehabilitation, construction programs for many years throughout the entire Lehigh Valley. And so Community Action Lehigh Valley has been working with the city of Bethlehem dating back years to acquire blighted properties, rehab them, and sell them to first-time home buyers. We had a great program doing this within the city. I think we have about 15 units that were rehabbed and sold. But something happened during the pandemic, which was as housing prices went up, we started to see there were fewer and fewer blighted, abandoned properties throughout our city that were available to purchase for really cheap and rehab. The private market was taking care of them. A private investor could see an opportunity in a property that they could acquire that was really run down and think, I can put some money into that, fix it up, and I'm going to be able to sell it or rent it out and make my money back. So that meant for us at Community Action, we had to rethink our model for how we were going to provide affordable housing to the community. We heard from so many of our neighbors throughout the opening doors process, and as we talk to our neighbors every day at work, we hear that there aren't enough affordable rental opportunities, especially. In the past, Community Action had worked primarily in the area of homeownership, but we were hearing a stronger and stronger need for rental properties. At Community Action, we're really good at rehabbing properties, at creating energy efficient, high quality properties for our neighbors, but we don't do property management. And as I mentioned before, we've really struggled to acquire physical property in this market. We used to be able to pay $40,000 for a blighted rundown house. You're not going to find those opportunities anymore. And the cost of acquiring a property makes it almost impossible for us to be able to rehab it and then sell it to a first-time home buyer. So we had to get creative and think about how we were going to operate in this new market that we're living in here in the city of Bethlehem. So one of the first things was thinking, how are we going to acquire properties now? Well, instead of purchasing properties, what if we were able to find a partner who owned a property, who was willing to retain ownership and commit to making that property affordable housing? We've been very fortunate in Bethlehem to have such a partner at Cathedral Church in the Nativity, which is located, right at the intersection of Wyandotte by the Hill to Hill Bridge. They had purchased about 10 years ago
2 properties next to their church that have been sitting vacant for over 15 years. And they weren't quite sure what they were going to do with them. And as a church, they lacked sort of the capacity to fundraise to rehab these properties that need a substantial amount of work to turn them back into usable housing of any type. So when they approached us at Community Action, we said, yeah, we'd be happy to help figure out a way to rehab them. But there was a missing piece then. If these are going to be rentals, who would manage them? And we're extremely fortunate that right around the corner from the church, we have a tremendous partner, New Bethany, and I see a couple of friends from New Bethany here today, who are extremely skilled in operating affordable housing throughout the Lehigh Valley and placing tenants into these properties who will be successful. So they find tenants who are income qualified and they provide the supports to the tenants so they're able to remain stable in these homes for the long term. So we developed a partnership among our organizations, the church, New Bethany, Community Action, and have worked with the city, who have been incredibly supportive in terms of helping us to acquire the funding necessary to rehab these properties. So today I'm happy to share that we've secured $765,000 in support for the rehabilitation of these properties. We've had to get creative with our funding because a lot of traditional funding sources don't allow you to do these kind of creative partnerships. We've been very fortunate that our state government has provided support for programs that allow us to take creative approaches, as well as our corporate partners. I see one, Mirta here from Embassy Bank, who is one of the investors in this project through the Special Priorities Program, tax credit program. And so we've been able to start work on the property. You'll start to see movement there's been a little bit of movement, and over the next couple of months, you'll start to see these 2 houses here right on the end transform into 6 units of affordable housing. The church is committed to keeping those as affordable for a minimum of 15 years, and we're hoping that they, exist long into the future as 6 new units of affordable housing for our community members right here on the south side. One just last thing I'll mention is at Community Action, anytime we're investing in a specific property, we want to make sure that the benefit extends to the surrounding neighborhood as well. So not only will we be focusing on these 2 properties, but we're looking to make additional improvements to the surrounding neighborhood as far as facade improvements, streetscape improvements, potentially a mural, looking at the pocket park on the corner, thinking how we extend that benefit so that the entire area benefits, not just the tenants of those future homes. So thank you so much to you guys for the opportunity to feature that.
Thank you, Anna. And I realized that I never actually introduced myself. I am Sarah Satullo. I'm Deputy Director of Community Development for the city. So as you can see, we're trying to get creative and finding kind of new ways to work in the sort of environment that we're facing with funding and changing kind of priorities at the federal level and the rapid change of affordability in the Lehigh Valley. So the next partnership that we're going to be talking about, I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a little bit. We're going to use it as a case study. I'm going to get a little wonky. If I lose you, please let me know if you have a question. Feel free to throw this out. We're kind of trying to demystify how a lot of these processes work, and they're very complicated things, so don't be afraid to ask a question. We keep hearing, every once in a while, why aren't we building more housing, especially affordable housing, when the need is so great? There is such demand. Why is the market not responding? So these are just, a couple snapshots of headlines. There are various projections out there about how many housing units the U.S. is short, but the estimates go anywhere from 4.5 to 7 million, depending on who you're talking to. And this has deep roots going back to the Great Recession, for those of you and us, that were around and remember what happened to our housing market then. We have never picked up building homes since then. So now for decades, we've been underbuilding, and we do not have enough housing for everyone that lives here in the United States. This is no longer just a West Coast or a big city problem. For many years, you would hear about San Francisco or Portland or Seattle, but that wasn't something that was coming to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. That really, wasn't even an issue there. There might be one suburb that was more expensive, but you could always find somewhere in kind of close proximity. And this really changed pretty rapidly for this community, but it is part of a nationwide trend. So we've been underbuilding In communities across America, the rules and government processes for building new housing are long. They are unpredictable. New development often faces a lot of opposition. All of those things drive up costs. And right now we've been in, I'm sure as most of you are aware, if you've tried to buy anything, a high interest rate environment, and construction costs skyrocket during the pandemic as well, and they've really never come back down. So all of this is a recipe for very high housing costs. In a market economy, scarcity drives up costs. So it's just like at Christmas when your kid wants that like it toy that everybody wants and you can't find it except for on eBay where somebody is charging 3 times, the price that you could have gotten it at Target. That's what we are seeing right now when you go out to buy a house, rent an apartment. Every person who's a potential tenant or home buyer is competing against more people than any time in recent American history. That just means that there are not enough housing units, and we need like a variety of solutions. There is not one like single solution that is going to solve this problem. It's going to require a lot of creativity, a lot of thinking outside the box. Like we know in Bethlehem alone, we just need 1,042. Well, that was actually the projection. We finished our housing study. It's grown. We know since the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission has been updating those numbers. So close to 1,100 new units to meet the needs of just the residents that live here today. This is not talking about our community growing. This is just the people who live here today. This is kind of the backdrop that all development, market rate, nonprofit, affordable development is competing in right now. Okay. So I guess I kind of went over this already with all of you, jumped my slide a little bit. But why is development slow when the need is so high? When you have those high interest rates, tariffs are causing pricing uncertainty. Those lengthy government approvals introduce uncertainty. More uncertainty means real estate investors want a bigger return. And developers can't build what they can't get a loan for. And so why you're seeing so much of these higher end developments coming online and why they're charging such higher rents, it's the only way that they can make these projects financially work. And so we're going to dive into, and this is where, as I said, I'm going to get a little in the weeds. We're going to dive into what these projects look like what a market rate project looks like and what then an affordable project looks like. So all of those kind of factors on the last side, they are all playing a huge role. I know that market rate developers are not don't garner a lot of sympathy usually. A lot of times they can be the subject of a lot of kind of frustration for folks. Maybe you think, so what if it costs them $400,000 to build one apartment? But I'm telling you that we all need to care about that because those costs end up being spread out across our entire housing market for all of us. If it costs more to build, they are going to build less and there's going to continue to be more scarcity. And if a market rate unit is costing $400,000, that probably means that an affordable unit is costing $560,000 to build. And we'll kind of get into more of those reasons why. Every kind of developer out there right now is facing high land costs, high building costs, high interest rates, and it's hard for any of them to make the numbers work, but especially affordable and nonprofit developers. So this results in increasingly affordable projects needing more and more public support to bridge their financing gaps, or as this slide calls it, a funding gap. And if you were wondering what is a funding gap, I'm going to tell you. This graphic does a pretty good job of breaking down all of the elements in a market rate and an affordable deal, and the gaps that they have to fill. And unfortunately, the pointer is not working on here. So I am talking right now first here in this market rate cost, that reddish, pinkish column. Those are your hard costs, are the literal physical construction costs of building, paying your construction workers, buying your lumber, your materials. And those are generally about 60 to 70% of an overall project cost. Those soft costs, those are your permits, your architects, your engineers, and those are what we call your soft costs. And those account for about 20 to 30% of a project. And then land is always a big variable, just depending where you are, what the condition of the land is. That can be 10 to 20% In Bethlehem, the cost of land is a huge, huge barrier. We know that only 2% of our land that could be developed for residential units is vacant. So that means that anything that comes on the market gets a lot of interest and very high prices. And you're just seeing in terms of a lot of the development we're having coming online, there's just fewer opportunities and developers are getting more creative, and some of them are proposing tearing down units because land has become so valuable. And the project that we're going to kind of talk about shortly, the Gateway on 4th, that has only possible through the generosity of Lehigh Valley Industrial Park. They made a $4.5 million land donation. There is no way this project could happen without that. So it's just like, when we're going to go kind of over into the income here. So as you can see, the market rate rents are much, much higher than what you're bringing in on an affordable project. And the development's like projected rental income, just like when you're trying to buy a house and get a mortgage, it determines how big of a loan that the bank is willing to offer. So market rate developments are typically financing 60 to 80% of their costs in a loan. And that's really based on how much rental income that they can show the bank that they're going to get. But affordable buildings are only bringing in a fraction of that. And that's where that, as you can kind of see, the difference in that funding gap comes about. So they're usually only able to finance about 30% of their construction costs, and they have to find another way to fill that hole, make up those costs. So it's just like if you were approved for a $275,000 house and you go to the bank and you say, actually, I really want to buy this $550,000 house. They're going to say, well, show us your income. How are you going to pay for it? That is the same thing that a market rate developer, an affordable housing developer is going to have to show to be able to finance their projects. Market rate deals rely very heavily on investor equity. And sometimes these higher interests, like this one is showing a mezzanine loan. So essentially, whatever they cannot get a bank to finance, they're covering that through various types of investment. And that's usually the most expensive part of a deal because that is the riskiest loan, and these people tend to get paid back later in a deal. They want anywhere from 15 to 25% return on their investment. And that is something that can also make or break a deal. Those high expectations of returns put really big pressure on the type of rents they're offering and the sales price on properties. So one of the ways that the government can play a role in housing production is finding a way to lessen those pressures, to take out that investor equity and replace it with other types of money at lower cost. So then if you look over just at the affordable projects, they have that bigger funding gap. They do have some, and they have investment in there as well from investors. But because they have so little rental income that they can show, because they're charging, like, for example, the Gateway, the starting rent is $272 a month, depending on your income, then you need to turn to all of these kind of other sources of potential funding. And they're usually government types of sources. So you're looking for state, federal grants, you are looking for incentive programs that maybe make you not pay your property taxes for the first 10, 15 years, any sort of incentive like that. Or donated land, which like we have in the Gateway project, that's another way to cut down the costs. And one thing you see called out there as a big way of closing that gap are low-income housing tax credits. So what is a low-income housing tax credit? It is the nation's largest affordable rental housing production program. It has created over 3.7 million affordable rentals since the late 1980s. And those tax credits help cover that gap between a market rate rent and an affordable rent to keep the prices down. The tax credits are issued by the IRS to states based on your population size, and then they're allocated by state housing finance agencies. In Pennsylvania, that's a Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. Developers sell those credits to investors who are then using them to offset their federal income taxes. The 9% credits are the most popular because they generate the most money, and there's so much competition for them. It is very common that the first time you go in on a project, you are not expecting to be awarded. Like, it may take you applying 2 or 3 times. The last round, the Lehigh Valley had 6 projects and only 2 were awarded. They come with a 30-year affordability period, and at year 15, there is a way for the properties to opt out. So this is just kind of LIHTC gets a lot of criticism, and some of them are warranted. It is one of those imperfect tools. It has done a lot of good, but it's far from the most efficient or affordable way to build new housing. It's actually really, really slow and complex. Federal funding, once you put it in a project, you are automatically increasing your costs by 30 to 40%. So that's why earlier when I said if a market rate unit is $400,000, you could be looking at $560,000 on an affordable built at the same time, same community, within 2 blocks of each other. And they also carry a lot of requirements on things like building efficiency, unit counts, a lot of programs that are all coming from good places of trying to seek the sort of outcomes and kind of live into principles I think that we all would agree are good things to be trying to do, but they inadvertently drive up the costs. So like they're things that are aimed at making our buildings greener, healthier, and safer to live in, to protect the environment from irresponsible development, to ensure that the workers constructing these units are paid fair wages. But when you combine all of those different regulations together, it just means that it becomes increasingly complex and expensive to get from like the idea of I want to build this to being able to come into construction. So in the Lehigh Valley, or actually I'm going to speak for Bethlehem. I can't speak for like our prices over with our friends in Allentown or Easton could probably speak to, but in Bethlehem, we're looking between $350,000 to $375,000 right now per market rate unit. And like $450 to $475 on an affordable unit. So that really means that all of those LIHTC projects require more public money to get the shovels in the ground. But the complexity that introduces is, and this is from testimony to Congress about potentially reforming the LIHTC program, is when you're bringing together this many sources of financing, they all have different timelines, they have different regulations. You apply for a grant and then you wait 7 months to find out if you've gotten the money or not. All of the grants have staggered timelines. They don't really sync very well. It's actually something we've been urging the state to hopefully try to link up with the LIHTC process. So we're hoping to see that in the Governor's Housing Action Plan. So all of this has met for the Gateway on 4th, as I had said, this affordable housing project. It is our first tax credit project in the city of Bethlehem in more than a decade. So we're super, super excited to see this coming online. It's at 4th and William Streets. It's a pretty prominent corner coming in at the eastern gateway of the city. And I know for the public, it can feel like these things are moving so slow. So I put together, and this is only like a high level kind of timeline of just showing kind of all of the work that has been going beyond, like behind the scenes. Like, after we announced the project throughout 2024, we applied for 5 different grants in partnership with our development partner, Penrose. We went to the zoning hearing board. We brought on Neighborhood Health Center of the Lehigh Valley as our first floor tenant. So we're very, very excited about that, to be having this federally qualified health center in the neighborhood. We submitted our application in February, and we waited. In that time, we closed on the property. We applied for another 4 grants, and we were finally awarded the LIHTC award in October. And we were thrilled because there was no guarantee to get it in the first round. So this year, we're really working on all of that finalization of getting to the real estate closing. And all of those different layers of funding bring a lot of complexity to them. And so we're doing a lot of like the final design and engineering. Like our team is having weeks with the weekly meetings with the developers, going through things like where are we putting the trash cans and where are the recycling bins, to everything from like how does the sprinkler system work. So this is the site here. We have at this point 10 different funding sources. The first phase is going to be 60 units. Partially in a like mid-rise building at the corner, and then there are also stacked townhomes to the rear of the property, fronting, and they're kind of matching the houses that are along the street there. So we are super, super excited about the project. incredibly grateful to LVIP. As I had said earlier, without their donation, it never would have been possible. And then they really treated the city as a partner in this process, and made it collaborative, where we interviewed developers, we selected them, and like we are working and meeting like at least once a month, kind of working through all of the steps together. They are very experienced commercial developers. This is their first big housing development, so we're really grateful that they were willing to step up for our community in this way. So does anybody have any questions about all of that?
Are going to be screening the tenants when they come in?
I mean, Penrose has an application process that's in line with, HUD requirements.
Did they remove the gas tanks? Because I noticed that they tore down the building.
Yes, the whole site has been remediated. But that is part of what LVIP actually paid for in the acquisition. Did you have a question, sir? No.
I wanted to ask about the financing. You mentioned funding coming. Who would pay for it? Would it be the state or would it be federal for these projects, or would it be financed? You mentioned interest rates, which makes it predictably more expensive for the tenants. How can we make it in such a way that these people who are already in poverty, needing this affordable housing, can move in with their job 40 hours a week, they're making $17 an hour and such?
So it definitely depends project by project. Specifically on the Gateway, they do get their loan and financing through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, which does offer more favorable interest rates. And we're going to talk, we're kind of gearing up to, you're previewing kind of the next thing. How can the government step in ways to offer even better interest rates, perhaps, that will spur production? Anybody else?
You may want to contact the Bethlehem area OTEC, because some of their kids could be some of the carpenters and laborers on that project. And on their force account, you don't have to pay Davis-Bacon wages. So Penrose should be aware of that. If they're not, you may want to pass that on to them. Also, you'll have a cadre of volunteers coming out now, because SNAP benefits, you got to go somewhere and do some volunteer work. So there's a whole big group of people that could give you a hand, even just doing site supervision or flagging people down on 5th Street. So you have all sorts of opportunities there as well. The people that I work with at Victory House, some of those gentlemen want to be one of the first ones that get in. And that's why I asked about your tenant screening process, because they need to kind of clean out a lot of their people into somewhere else so they can maybe build up on their structure as well.
Thank you. That's an interesting suggestion. Community Action Development Bethlehem has offered that once the list open, that they will help potential tenants apply and kind of manage an interest list and provide kind of any sort of support that someone might need to get.
And I did have some questions for Anna, if I cannot take up the whole audience here, but there again, you may want to partner with the people that are renting currently. Now, I know some of them are senior citizens, like myself, but you may be able to get force account CETA workers right out of that project. That then you don't have to pay Davis-Bacon, and it saves some money. You may even get from HUD a waiver on Davis-Bacon for that project if you approach them the right way. Are there any state subsidized houses over in Marmite and Pembroke anymore? The state used to have their own units over there through PHF.
Not that I am aware of.
You may want to run that by BHA. And we tried to partner with BHA because 5 years ago, they had a program where the top person on the Section 8 list went through training, kind of what CAC does for first-time home buyers, and then they were going to put the person into a unit and use their Section 8 subsidy to pay down the mortgage. Do they still have that available?
I don't believe BHA does, but I know the Easton Housing Authority has been setting that program up.
It's a wonderful way to get people of low and moderate income. The gap between what they can afford and what's out there is like this, as you well know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great program, and we would love to see it. I am not 100% certain about BHA having it, but I know it was kind of presented 2 years ago as a new thing for the Valley when Easton was starting it.
And you may want to dust off goes about 40 years back. You may want to dust off the old Bacon program that was done for South Terrace, where Mr. Bacon from Philadelphia, his son was a very famous actor, he had a tiered structure of high, middle, and low income. And I think in subsidized housing, we need to go that route because people of middle and upper income kind of take care of the place and say, hey, don't pick up your trash, because they're living there. So I would say income levels ought to be discussed with what you're doing over at Pembroke.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I guess kind of my last thing on Gateway, just at this point we've got like 5 to 7 public funding sources. We are waiting to hear back on a grant or two, and that's not terribly unusual in this day and age for an affordable project. And they all come with those varying requirements that we're navigating. So obviously, going through this process has been really great to think about, like, how are ways that we could make another one of these developments easier to happen. We're having firsthand experience trying to overcome these barriers in this market, and like we need to broaden the toolbox and the amount of options we have out there. So that brings us to strategy 2, offer incentives to create and preserve affordable housing. And that there is one of the Southside Lofts buildings, which was our last low-income housing tax project before the Gateway. So just again, kind of reminding you that this is that stack that we were talking about. And we're going to be talking about ways to close that funding gap in affordable deals. We want to find ways to lower costs, speed up projection, and then provide incentives that get both market rate units out and like rentable faster, and also find ways to get them to include affordable units in their projects. How can we make that financially possible for them to do that? So, we hear all the time that residents don't want more luxury apartments and they want more affordable housing. And one of the ways to make a project more financially feasible is offering revolving loans. So this was the recommendation out of Opening Doors, that the city should explore some sort of revolving loan fund that could help with acquisition costs, pre-development financing, construction financing, all those kinds of things to close the gap on a project we would want to see happen and try to bring it to coming online to being a unit that someone can live in faster. But as we've been working to implement the plan, and our housing policy lead, Emily Valenta here, has been spending a lot of time researching in the increasingly different ways that communities are turning to a new type of loan fund and investing in a model that cuts red tape to expedite that housing production, requires lower returns on investment than private investors want, and allows projects that are market rates to financially make sense to a developer to include affordable units. We don't want to keep relying on just LIHTC to bring us units. It's a great program, but it's not going to help us close that gap with what the timeline and how long it takes to get us those 1,100 units that we know that we need. So we are exploring a revolving loan fund model that could allow for more tenant protections, those things that we've been hearing that people want. Because when the government invests it's money in a property, and sometimes in these models, it also takes a long-term ownership stake. So it addresses a lot of the concerns that drive folks to City Hall, being upset that they are experiencing exploitative rent hikes, which are legal under the law, but are harmful to our community and the ability for our residents to stay there. So this model gives local governments more options for creating affordable units while also protecting tenants. So all of this research has led us to an organization known as the Center for Public Enterprise. They are philanthropically funded, which means they charge very little money to the local governments that they work with. And they've emerged as the national leader in developing funds that meet a community's unique real estate market. Emily and I have been lucky to get to spend a lot of time interviewing and talking to the people who have worked to build these in other communities, counties, cities across the country. And every single one of them asked us, have you talked for the Center for Public Enterprise yet? They were we couldn't have done this without them. It would have been impossible to do this. So we are thrilled. Bethlehem City Council supported us engaging in working with CPE at a very, very low cost. And we have just started exploring how a revolving loan fund could work in the city of Bethlehem. The aim would be to offer low interest short-term loans for either developing, preserving, or rehabilitating mixed income housing to take a project that is strong from infeasible to being shovel ready. So if you're asking, I'm not expecting you to read this whole graphic or anything like that, but what is a revolving loan fund? Essentially it's self-sustaining. It's a loan that is paid back. The faster it's paid back, it means it can invest in the next project. So a lot of these funds, you're seeing what they call a 3 or a 5 year revolve, which means that initial loan is paid back often after you get out of construction when you're going into your more permanent loan structure. And so we're starting to see states, cities, and counties all use these to try to increase affordability and just bring more housing units online faster. The real gold standard has been Montgomery County, Maryland. And you may have read about it, it's gotten a lot of press. But I really thought this quote here from the executive director really sums up kind of what it's all about. That the private sector is focused on return on investment, and our return is public good. So this is a partnership between Montgomery County, the county government, and then essentially their public housing authority. And they have worked together to take out a $100 million bond, a housing production bond. And they are acting like, as they put it, benevolent real estate investors to help jumpstart stalled market rate projects that these were market rate, some of them were luxury projects, but they couldn't make the numbers work in this environment. But with the assistance of this government-backed loan, they can now get the project built and get them to include affordable units. The loan in this particular program is a 5-year term. After the project is built, the loan is repaid and then available for the next one. When they revolve that initial loan out, they are replacing the construction debt with government bonds that come at better rates. And that then gives them a 70% ownership stake in the property. So then that rental income is coming back to the housing authority and county to invest in future projects and in the fund. So, as I had said, the developers are typically looking for 15% to 25%. HOC is charging 5%. So that's enough to cover their costs. It's enough to make them money, but that's the make or break difference for getting these projects across the line. And this is just a photo from that New York Times piece that highlighted residents and people, living at the property, how they came to be there. And so this is a mother who had been priced out of her townhome, single mom, and this was like a godsend to her to find this, to be able to stay in the school district where she was sending her kids and not be spending almost 50% of her income. So one thing that we are very excited about, that in addition to our work, Lehigh County Executive Josh Siegel is here, and he is going to tell us a little bit about his housing plan and how a revolving loan fund can play into it.
So I'm the newly sworn in Lehigh County Executive Josh Siegel, and actually, funny enough, Paul Williams, who runs the Center for Public Enterprise, is somebody who I've admired greatly, and the Montgomery County, Maryland model was one that I talked a lot about on the campaign trail. And so you've seen tonight a lot of different housing components, right? And what I think is incredible, what Bethlehem's done, what Allentown's done through our city rezoning, is every individual housing strategy itself has within it an inherent limitation. Upzoning is great for building more market rate units, which help people kind of move up from older units, which then frees up those older units and makes them more affordable. But what I love about this strategy and why I think it's so important from a county perspective is Bethlehem really shouldn't have to do this alone, in my opinion, nor should Allentown, nor should Easton. The housing crisis is a really a bi-county issue, a regional issue in nature. And it makes a lot of sense, candidly, for counties to take that task on. And I think one of the simplest reasons of all is that, frankly, the suburbs have to do a much better job at integrating and building additional housing. The cities themselves should not be exclusively responsible for building all of the mixed income or affordable housing. Not that we shouldn't densify and build our urban areas up. To be candid, walkable mixed-use communities are something I believe in wholeheartedly. It's where people want to live. We want to be near amenities like grocery stores and trails and good schools. But as you've heard, there's a fundamental limitation about what we can do in our cities themselves. There's just only so much land left to build. There's only so many adaptive reuse projects. There's only so much vacant land you can conceivably build on. Last week, we met with the City of Allentown's DCD department. And believe it or not, the City of Allentown actually has 4,700 units in the developmental pipeline over the next 1 to 5 years, which is incredible because that's actually half of the actual housing deficit that exists in the Lehigh Valley. Now, granted, those aren't going to come on and be part of the inventory in 1 year, but it's proof that cities have a role to play, and we should continue to densify them where possible and put more folks in our cities because that's great for everything from the environment to the health and financial well-being. But a model like this at the county level, which is what Montgomery is able to do, allows each municipality, in my opinion, to kind of play its fair share and do its part. And so my ambition as the executive, and we're going to be meeting with Northampton County next week. Tara Zarinsky is the new county executive here in Northampton. The idea is to really form a bi-county housing production fund where the two counties themselves will take on the role and responsibility. And to be candid, I really do view this as a multifaceted effort. So just to give you a perspective on what it would cost for Lehigh County to float the debt, to put things in perspective. So Montgomery County did a $100 million bond. It was actually two $50 million tranches over the course of 2 years. So they initially floated $3 million in debt to pay for a $50 million bond. The project was so successful, they built on it. In Lehigh County, we can float about $60 million of debt for about $2.5 million. You might recognize we have very tight budgets at the municipal level. We don't just have a lot of discretionary funds lying around. And so my hope, honestly and candidly, is that ultimately this revolving loan fund will perhaps necessitate or negate the need for Bethlehem to go itself, and that we will all bind together as municipalities, because I genuinely think we can do far more together in the Lehigh Valley if we had a single bi-county initiative, with each municipality, in my opinion, trying to pay some part of that debt service itself. So we're in conversations right now with different jurisdictions trying to secure memorandums of agreement or understanding that each municipality will kind of pay its part. So if you think about that initial $2.5 million getting you to $60 million in debt, you could see the City of Allentown and Bethlehem and Easton each kind of contributing a portion of that debt service. The counties themselves should, I think, genuinely commit some of it themselves. And I think there's a world for the philanthropic sector to play a huge role in shouldering some of that debt service. Because what's incredible about this model is it scales up immensely. So over the next 20 years, Montgomery County, Maryland thinks it can build 6,000 units of housing. So that $100 million investment, self-sustaining, self-sufficient, yields 6,000 units. Now imagine if you double it or triple it, right? And I know it seems perhaps inconceivable or ambitious, but it really isn't, I think. I mean, look, the United Way raised $29 million last year, right? That's incredible. This is such an impressive ROI. It's a scalable, proven model. And so I ask anybody in this room to just kind of envision what it would mean if we had $5-6 million at our disposal, the amount of housing we could build. And what's incredible about this model is think of it like the public option for housing, right? Just like we want a public option in healthcare, this is the public option for housing that, in my opinion, would help hold down rents for people all across the Lehigh Valley, because it would be a true competitor for the private sector. And you couldn't gouge as much if you knew there were affordable public sector units online. You can't raise your rents as much because those residents might choose our housing over yours. And the other thing I want to add, I know it's not necessarily the production fund model, is what we're exploring. We're going to try to bring in Baker Tilly. Some of you might have seen that some housing authorities around the country, Philadelphia is actually a pioneer in this respect, are going out and procuring market rate units and buying existing private sector inventory and converting it into mixed income public sector housing. So the Philadelphia Housing Authority is actually out there right now buying up small scale, mid-sized kind of market rate projects, 64 units, 74 units here and there. They think they can add about 2,000 units to their overall inventory and portfolio. And so I'm interested in working with our Lehigh County Housing Authority to explore what we kind of call like an aggressive asset acquisition model. And the idea is, like, our housing authorities are great, they do tremendous work, but they're stuck, I think, in this old world mindset of maintain and hold what they have. We've got to get more ambitious about bringing new units online. This is one way we can build new inventory. But I, used to be a renter. I lived in Congress Street Apartments. That apartment complex has shifted hands 3 times in the last 10 years. And we know that private equity and lots of private sector investors are scooping up private sector housing. One of the ways we can push back at the local level are models like this to make sure that we're in the driver's seat and we're making these projects pencil out. And so I'm at the helm in Lehigh County. This is a top priority for me. We're already starting to take the steps. I think we can get this done if we all row in the same direction and work together. And I think it requires the nonprofit sector and the government sector to come together to raise those funds. But what I think is exciting is that it works. We're not asking for anyone to take a leap of faith. This is a real dollar for dollar ROI. And there's really no risk here for, I think, the government or the nonprofit sector. If we had the dollars, we could build the housing. So I don't know. I don't want to take this is your show.
Okay.
I was just glad to be here.
If you're talking with Northampton County, I've talked to Tara about this extensively about a year ago. We should form a countywide CHODO to work with HUD directly, not bypassing the city's oversights, but there's a lot of things CHODOs can do that doesn't handicap you in some regards. Secondly, you can solve a big problem and take the heat off of city council if you could do low-income to moderate-income housing between our border with Allentown, because there's a big empty lot, as you're probably well aware. And
I may have heard something about
and if we could put demonstration units in there, because I'm working right now with something called tiny homes. And a lot of people want to downsize. You put 10 tiny homes on that lot, they'll be sold in a week. The guy that is in Lancaster, he just built one yesterday. He had 3 people ask if they could buy it, and his prices kept going up as they approached him. But those are some of the demonstrations as well. And there's a large swath of land behind the old, I know it's a big project they're doing over off of Hanover Street, but the old
State Hospital property.
State Hospital, there's a whole swath of land behind there. Faces the sun, you could put, your solar type of people on the spot, build a home that's going to save people money who are low to moderate income.
I think the tiny home model is definitely something worth exploring. But, at least for the time being, I think this is the shot in the arm. This is the thing I think that has the potential to be a silver bullet. Because as you've heard, and as I've worked as a city councilman and a state representative, the LIHTC program is great, but it's very archaic. It's very slow. And too many developers I've seen thought they were going to get the credits and didn't, and the project stalls. And I think we are all watching the sort of instability in the world. What's great about this model is it divorces us from, in my opinion, sort of the chaos and unpredictability and allows us to chart our own course. And that's the most important thing, is this is a local resilient model where it's our own destiny. We get to choose for our residents. And I think it's a way to combat greed in the housing sector in a really aggressive way. So I commend Bethlehem, because I got to tell you, when I was talking about this, people were like, "You're freaking nuts! What are you going to do? $100 million bond!" And then I have to say, 2 months before November, this story came out that they were working with the Center for Public Enterprise. I printed that out before the link shut down. I was like, yes, we're doing this. So just kudos to Bethlehem, because it really is a courageous endeavor.
Well, thank you for your advocacy on our behalf.
They're further along than I am. So no, seriously, it's very innovative and it's very bold. Seriously, and Mayor Reynolds for leading the way here. So thanks a lot for inviting me.
Thanks so much for coming, Josh.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing and leading the way.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Business card.
I
know how to get in touch with you. The other thing, you better tell Don Cunningham to back off of the warehouses, because the warehouses are land that we can put in.
We're on data center. We're beyond warehouse.
Data centers now.
Just to give you an example of Moore Township, where we're gonna buy.
My wife's gonna yell at you. I thought.
Well, real quick, a developer was gonna come in and buy pre-manufactured housing,
Yeah.
And they were gonna buy the whole thing, kick everybody out, and build a warehouse up there, but they didn't have the water. But we have water, both of our cities have water, that's what makes us attractive.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate it. And I have to say, I felt the same way when I saw your story. I was like, oh my God, this is what we've been looking for. So we're very excited for the leadership and excited to work together. I just would, kind of echo him, the idea that it is really taking our destiny in our own hands and not being tied up in other timelines and funding sources. Like, the only thing that's holding us back right now from building housing is having enough money to do it. It's not, we have good programs, we have good people. We know how to do this in a community-driven way that doesn't displace people and increase gentrification. We just need more money. And so if you guys can bear with me, we have one last section here. Okay, so as Laura said, working in reverse here, strategy 1 is updating our zoning and land use to encourage a variety of housing types and infill development. Because as we've been kind of talking about all night, the market right now is building those two ends of this diagram here, those big multifamily buildings and expensive single family homes, and we're not building anything else in the middle. So how can we, as a local government, do things to make it easier and more affordable to build the type of housing that we're hearing from our community that they want to be living in, that they need? So the thing that we've been working on for the last few months, I think this battery might be dead. I think if you could help with the, yes. Oh. Okay, yeah. So the first thing that we've been looking at is what are known as accessory dwelling units, ADUs. You may have heard them called in-law suites, granny flats, carriage houses. They have a lot of names, alley houses, a little bit of an identity crisis here. But essentially they're small self-contained housing units that can either stand alone or be like an addition or a conversion of a basement or of an attic in the primary house on our property. So they exist all over Bethlehem historically, but currently our zoning largely prevents new ones from being built. We have like a small carve out if it's a caretaking situation, but as soon as you stop being a caretaker, no one can live in that unit any longer. So we've been spending the last few months exploring how ADUs could fit into an array of housing options and choices for the city via a zoning study. So we released a survey, our housing options survey. It was out from October to December. We had 441 total responses. It was also our first experience with a bot attack in a survey. These are all 441 legitimate responses, but that was an interesting experience for us. We held 2 pop-up engagements and pushed out the survey over social media, asked our partners to share it, and had a pretty good response for a small sample size. And this flyer here, if you're interested in reading, more about what this process is like, there are some out front that you can grab on your way out. Thank you, Corey. Okay, so as part of the survey, we were asking about where you live, kind of your income, what neighborhood you lived in, and we had pretty equal representation from all neighborhoods of the city. We did find that the responses leaned more heavily towards homeowners, despite our city being almost 50-50 renters and homeowners. That's also not surprising because, if you wanted to build an ADU, you would need to own the property that your primary residence was living on. There was also a kind of overrepresentation of large households compared to just the city households as a whole. But that also makes sense because ADUs are really considered a multi-generational living solution. So it kind of makes sense that you would self-select in taking the survey. So the first question we asked everyone was, have you or someone you know experienced any of the following over the last 5 years? And so they're all kind of indicators of housing stress. And we really found in the responses that housing stress is widespread across the entire city. And there was, from every neighborhood in the city, interest in adding or living in an additional living unit like an ADU or basement apartment, and that there was interest in multi-generational living no matter how much money you made, if you were low income or extremely high income. And so I thought I had deleted that slide. Whoops. So There was also lower income respondents were more likely to report cost-related challenges, which obviously also is not surprising. And with that multi-generational living, about 35 to 45% of respondents reported that experience. And we did allow for folks to kind of type in short responses, and I think some of them were some of the most interesting. So the feedback on this was that they were having difficulty finding small enough housing to live in as a single person. There just had been not enough small studios, and that has been kind of bearing out in the growing number of small households that we've been seeing in data both regionally and in the city. The next question we had asked was, from your perspective, how important is it for Bethlehem to expand housing options? And this was honestly even higher than we had anticipated. 92% of respondents felt that we needed more housing options by either very important or somewhat important. Support was present across every neighborhood, though West Bethlehem residents were not as strong as other neighborhoods, though I would still say it was a majority were very much in favor. So it really indicated that everyone sees housing availability as being a citywide issue. It's not just a neighborhood-specific issue. So then these were some of the things that we asked folks about how familiar they were with ADUs and how they understood them. So we had asked, who do you think would be most likely to live in ADUs in Bethlehem? And the most popular answers were single adults, aging parents, and adult children. And I think that reinforces what we've heard about both multi-generational living and being a solution for different life stages, where right now there aren't choices in housing that are matching where people are in their lives in terms of what they can afford or how much they need. And one of the feedback, we had received was that they should be available, but ideally they would be moderate to affordable and inhabited by people who need housing in that range or benefit from being close to the other home on the property. And then we had asked what the potential benefits could be. And across the city, the multiple benefits that were identified, they focused on housing availability, it being an efficient use of land and creating more flexible housing options. And the benefits related to multi-generational living were something that really seemed to resonate with folks. That was something that many people saw as a good outcome and benefit. And that was across all household sizes and income levels. And so these were just some of the things that we heard from folks, increased freedom of allowing people to make choices about what dwellings to have on their property and how to live. So kind of that idea of just having more choice over how you can use your own property. I thought this was kind of an interesting one, that provide opportunities for innovative building design, adding variety and interest in the home design in neighborhoods. So then there was kind of a section of the survey that was, what are the things that you really want the city to be thinking about as we explore this as a potential option? And the public wants us to think about the capacity of our infrastructure, parking availability, no surprises there, and design consistency with neighborhoods. There was not a huge focus on who lives there, but their privacy was still a concern for about 50% of respondents. So thinking through how are there ways that you could still provide privacy to neighbors and even the primary house on the property. So this was just some of the feedback we got from folks. I thought one that might resonate was some places are just too dense already and cannot support the extra stress on infrastructure in neighborhoods. That's why suburban ADUs strike me as a fine idea, but I prefer that in older neighborhoods with old homes that using existing structures might be possible. And we'd also asked, as part of these considerations, what folks consider to be their top barrier to adding one. And construction costs, financing, and permitting were top concerns, along with space constraints of a site. And those were evenly cited across neighborhoods, despite if you're familiar with Bethlehem, the size of a lot in the south side is very much smaller and more constrained than a lot on the north side. So, kind of overall, the key takeaways were that housing challenges and multi-generational living are really already part of daily life in Bethlehem. The interest is pretty consistent and widespread across income and both neighborhoods and backgrounds. the public sees clear benefits to potentially expanding the use of ADUs in the city, but they do really want us to have practical safeguards around infrastructure, capacity, and parking. And most of the barriers were more informational and financial, and those are all things that we are working in City Hall and with our team at Lehigh University and the Small Cities Lab to think through is how can we provide resources to overcome those barriers. And we have a great steering committee, which some of our steering committee members are here tonight, so thanks for coming, guys, who've been providing us like real-time feedback of like if you're a property owner and you're interested, what are the things that you would need to know to be able to do this. So the last thing that we are going to kind of ask of you all tonight is a quick little Mentimeter activity here. I don't know if any of you have done this before. You just scan the QR code with your phone, or you can go to menti.com and put in the that number there. We also have, if you're having trouble, we have some sheets that we can bring to you for you to scan as well.
Sarah, while they're doing that, I'd like to say from the Housing Opportunity Movement Board that I'm the president of, we would strongly encourage you in working with Penrose to on Fifth Street to blend into that cityscape is to do homes for sale. And we'll gladly work with you in getting that done because that shows what you're doing, and it also acts as a buffer between your rentals on the old Zoologic property as well as Fifth Street. It's a better mix for that area. So that's coming from my board. They wanted me to bring that to the meeting tonight, that we let you know we'd really like to see it. You could even do some ADUs on the front of that street, maybe some accessible ADUs right there.
Appreciate the feedback. That is something we are trying to incorporate into Choice, but in the instance of Gateway, those units are part of the LIHTC award. Those units count into
in the property itself.
On Fifth Street, there are stacked townhomes on Fifth Street.
For sale, though.
No, I mean they're part of a low-income housing tax credit. They have to be a rental, and that's part of the limitations of the LIHTC program. Is they have to be a rental.
And Jeff, we're happy to talk to you after, as we've talked to you often, so we can do that. But I'll let Sarah continue with the activity.
Okay. So we're just asking you to answer, how do you see yourself in relation to ADUs? Are you maybe interested in building one someday? Are you just here as an ambassador or a stakeholder? This is your community and you care about it. You want to learn, or you're still forming an opinion. These are all valid choices. We're just kind of curious of where you're coming from. You think go to the next one? Okay.
Survey says.
So kind of next question is, which ADU benefit do you think resonates most in Bethlehem? So if you were trying to sell your neighbor on the idea that you think it would be great for the city to allow these, do you think it's the multi-generational living, more housing choices, helping workers stay local, a better use of existing homes and properties? I always love seeing how they change as more people vote. All right, so far a lot of love for housing choices. Is anybody, okay, you went to the next one, all right. How comfortable are you with ADUs being visible in residential neighborhoods? So it's very, I like whoever that was, that first one out of the gate, very comfortable. So just kind of gauging a scale of where everybody's at.
I guess unsurprisingly, we have a very pro-housing crowd here in our housing workshop. But it's great to see.
So what questions or concerns should the city clearly address about ADUs? And this is just an open-ended one. Anything you think we should be thinking about, feel free to throw it out there. Or even if you have questions that you want us to answer about the
I don't
process.
have access to your Q code, but I will say something ought to be happening out in Harrisburg to permit a second principal use on a property. The MPC only allows you one principal use. That should be changed, and they haven't changed the MPC in, 35 years?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that could be updated in the MPC
I talked with both Bob Freeman and the local representative here, Steve Samuelson. They're gonna start looking at that because it's not only our city, it's like even Harrisburg's looking at it, and they're going right away to the Capitol to lobby for that. I will say I'm thankful for what they did with our zoning code because they took the EAC's comments. So there's a lot of things in the zoning code that allows for environmental concerns. And we had a presentation from one of your staffers, and he was very good about how they reoriented that. I had been preaching that for years, and now it finally happened.
Yeah, we're lucky to have a great EAC.
And these are some really great questions and concerns. If there's anybody who wants to even share what they've written out loud and expand on it, we're more than happy to hear.
I just have a question. Hi, thanks for everything. In terms of the CPE work and the revolving loan option, when you're talking about ADUs, would they be considered, since it's expanded housing and potentially for lower income or seniors that are retired, would they consider that as an opportunity to apply? Like, can they?
So
allowed to build that into the model?
we were lucky enough that City Council, with some of our American Rescue Plan dollars, allocated $5 million for implementing the Opening Doors plan. So we have set aside about $500,000 initially for whatever our ADU program could look like, and those would be incentives, that tied to income qualifications and affordability. And we're talking with CPE if there would be ways to potentially revolve that fund, so it's not just like we give somebody a $5,000 grant and it's gone. Could there be forgivable loans or partnerships? So we're trying to think through that. Because while the cost of building an ADU is a lot less than building a single family home, it's still a significant sum of money. And one thing that we have been working on with Community Action, New Bethany, Lehigh University as our kind of number one partner is the Alley House pilot program, where we are this spring going to begin construction in West Bethlehem, a pilot alley house in the backyard of a home on West Broad Street. The owners have agreed to run it affordably for 20 years? Okay, I wasn't sure what the final contract said. They were just signed today, so that was very exciting, the last contracts. And for 20 years, New Bethany will manage the property. They will place tenants who we know will be successful in the unit. And the property owner will have some passive income coming in, and New Bethany will get obviously a share of that for the property management. In this case, the homeowner's goal is that when they retire, that they would move into the ADU and then rent out their primary residence as a source of income. And so that's kind of their long-term plan. And they were willing to, go along in this process and pilot and work out a lot of the hiccups together. So we're very grateful to them.
Thanks so much for the question. Anybody else want to share any of their feedback here or expand on what they've written?
Question of sewer planning, do we have capacity?
So,
Yeah, anytime a proposed development comes in, there is a sewer module analysis that's performed. And right now, as part of its overall housing strategy work, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission is working on that analysis of Lehigh Valley infrastructure capacity to answer those questions, because those are often common concerns. But we are lucky in Bethlehem to have, a great public water authority and sewer system and, have access to a lot of public utilities.
but there's also a conversation happening at the state level, I think, in Harrisburg about even just the environmental review processes for the sewer modules and how the ADUs might be treated differently, because this is an emerging question in communities across Pennsylvania.
Act 537 is not a good thing.
Could you scroll down a little bit, Corey, because I was trying to see the one question there. I see a lot of homes that are single floor in the designs, what is stopping us for saving money and building up to cover less land and more houses. So our first ADU is actually a second story to maintain parking underneath. We are going to be, and you'll see a slide, having a workshop this spring to kind of talk through all of those trade-offs. Like, so if you make it a second floor and there's stairs to get at, that may be less accessible, but you have guaranteed parking. You keep it at one story, maybe that is a less efficient use of the land. Like, every sort of policy decision has a trade-off inherent in it. And we want to talk through a lot of them with the community to find out like where people are and what, how do we want this to look? I'm someone that is all for, trying to maximize our limited resources, but, some folks that are living next to one might feel differently, that they would prefer it to be of a lower height. So those will be some of the things that we'll be kind of sorting through as a community in the coming
I
months.
see you have Lehigh people here. Don't prohibit students from renting ADUs. Well, then go down to the South Mountain where their athletic facilities are. You could build a bunch of them down there. More students.
Well, this is really great feedback. Thank you, everybody, so much for this. I think we'll keep that recorded and added into our final planning process.
Okay. And as I had said, we're going to be having this ADU workshop. So we would invite you to come. If you scan the code, you'll be able to sign up and receive reminders and more information. But it's going to be at the Bethlehem YMCA. If you're familiar where the front desk is, there's kind of that open space meeting room behind it from 6 to 8 p.m. So it'll be a pretty interactive, a mix of kind of walking around and a little bit of education as part of it as well. And I think we have some papers out front with the information. And then I also wanted to give a plug to Anna's awesome Community Action Development Bethlehem, which Anna is running the community housing advocacy training. If you're not sick of me yet, I will be there on March 5th for that class. But it's oh no, I grabbed the wrong flyer, didn't I?
It's the same QR code.
It is the same QR code.
QR code.
I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong flyer there. But it is the same QR code, so that's good. Do you know what date it starts?
Yes, it's February 26th through April 16th. It's an 8-week program on Thursday evenings. The only change, it's not at Brockville Middle School. It's at the community action offices here on the south side.
And we do have printouts of the correct flyer back there.
Yes.
When was that YMCA? What was the time of that?
6 to 8 p.m. Well, thank you for being a wonderful audience. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them, but also want to be, respectful of your time. So if you want to just come up and ask us afterwards, that's fine too.